Okay, so in class today we moved the card matching game ahead a fair bit, although it wasn't a whole lot of lines of code. One thing we did is we took our card matching game class, which, if you recall, it takes a constructor, the count, how many cards we're going to use in the game, and a deck of cards that it deals the cards from. It deals the cards into internal vector called the hand, and it remembers the count in an internal variable called count, although I guess we don't really need that. We could just always check the size of the hand. We added two new getters, get count and get score, and we used get count today. So it's just a simple inline returns the value of count. Then most of the changes we made in get control. We moved the construction of the deck up to the top, and then we instantiate a game. So we create this game object, which is, we added, let's just check here first. We added a unique pointer to a card matching game called underscore game. So we're going to new up a new card matching game on the heap, and we're going to keep a smart pointer, a unique pointer, to it. Okay, and so we construct a card matching game object, and we save a unique pointer to it in underscore game, the member. And we construct it passing in count, which is just for now a constant integer defined up at the top here, and we pass it a raw pointer to deck. Remember, when we're passing parameters, they go by value, and because deck is a unique pointer, I can't copy it, and pass by value will do a copy. So if I tried to just pass the raw pointer, that wouldn't work. I would have to do something like use a std move, but that would actually pass ownership out of here and back into that, so I'd have to arrange to have pass ownership back. So this is quite acceptable. I know exactly what's happening in there. It's not going to do anything like delete the pointer by accident. So we're just passing the raw pointer to the deck, and in my card matching game, I'm just going to deal count cards off of the deck into the hand. And so now my model is done. I have count, so 16 for now, 16 cards in my hand, and those cards are going to represent the 16 cards that we're going to display on the screen. Or actually what we're going to do is we're going to create as many buttons as we have cards in the model. And I can keep track of the cards in the model through the index, and I can keep track of the buttons through, they have the same index. So if I have 10 buttons, if I have 10 cards, I'm going to construct 10 buttons, and they're in a vector with index 0 through 9. So the button corresponds to is a visual representation in the user interface of the card at the same index. Okay, and then we added a grid layout. Notice the grid layout has the central widget as a parent. And now, rather than just constructing one button, I just took this exact code. I didn't change any of this code, put it in the for loop, going from 0 to I goes from 0 to I is less than game get count. So I'm asking the game how many cards we're playing with, and I'm creating one button for each card in the game. And then the only thing I had to add was actually placing these cards in the grid layout. And I do that with the grid add widget, and it takes 3 parameters, a pointer to the widget that I'm adding, a row number, and a column number. And I'm just doing some basic integer math. So my index I is going to go from 0 to 16. My row is going to be I divide by 4, so row 1 for the first 4, row 2 for the next 4, and then my column is going to be I mod 4. Okay, and that's going to instantiate as many buttons as I have in my game. Each button is going to represent one object in the game. And then I had to make a small change in card buttons. Well, actually a big change. The first thing we did is we used this sender method that returns to us a pointer to the Q object that emitted the signal that caused this function or this slot to be run. Now, because any Q object can send a signal, we're getting a pointer to a Q object, so we have to cast it back to be a Q push button pointer. Now, that's normally a downcast is to be avoided. However, in this case, it's safe because we know the only thing we connected to that slot was Q push button object, so it must be a Q push button pointer that we're getting, or we're getting a pointer to a Q push button. So I use the dynamic cast function. That's a C++ keyword function. And I take this pointer I'm getting from sender, which is a Q object pointer, and I'm casting it as a Q push button pointer and storing it in this Q push button pointer variable called sending button. So I now have a pointer to the button that emitted the signal called sending button. And now I go through, the first thing I'm going to do is I want to figure out what the index of that button is, because I want to know which card sent it so I can turn that card over. And our first crack at that, all we do is loop through the card buttons and compare my sending button, the pointer that I have, to the pointer I stored in the card. But remember, the card buttons is a vector that's storing pointers to card buttons. So one of them is the sending button. And as soon as that is equal, I break out of that loop. And when I get to here, I is going to hold the index of the card button that was pressed. And so now I do this is exactly the same. We started out with this as being the name of the button on the form, and then we changed it to card buttons 0 when our last homework, which was to have we were only constructing one card button, we were putting it in a vector, and so the index was just 0. Now we changed that index to be I. So now, when we run this, it flips over the card that I click on. And it's still drawing a new card each time. So that's what we're going to fix next class. But your homework was to, I suggested, rather than finding the index this way, as an exercise to see how to use derived classes from the Q widgets and get more comfortable with inheritance, I suggested we create a card button object which extends the Q push button object and adds index value to it. And then what I do is just, we could, when we're constructing them, construct them with an index, and then we would just be able to ask for the index. So I created that in class. We did add class inherits from Q push button. So this card button is a Q push button with just a little extra. And the little extra I left for you to do. But what you're going to need to do is add a member that keeps track of what this button's index is. We did add the parameters index to parameters to the constructor, so index and get widget. And we looked at the card button. And notice this is in the view because this is a view object. This is a button that's going to be instantiated in the view. The controller will instantiate it, but this gets drawn just like the other buttons. And that's what we did today, and that was your homework. And I asked you also to think about a draw method. We're going to switch, whereas now we are in our on card button click, our slot that handles the clicked events, what we're doing right now is we're really just working with the state of the button. So when I click on a button, I look at that button and see, is it currently face up or face down? And if it's currently face down, so if the back of the card is showing, I draw a new card and I redraw that button face up. Well, what we're going to do next is, instead of redrawing the individual button that was clicked on, because with our game, other game state might change. If I turn up a button that matches another button, another card, then I want to show that that's a match by having a gray background instead of a white background, and I want to change it so that clicking on those buttons in the future does nothing, because they've been matched. If it's not a match, and it's a second, I already have one card face up, then I want to turn the card that was face up face down, because I don't want you to be able to turn all the cards face up. That would be too easy. So, and that's an example of a case where, well, both of those are examples of cases where the button I click on is going to have some change, but there's going to be a couple other buttons affected also. And then later on for homework, we'll also add a score. Okay, so that's it for today.